All right, we want to start welcoming everybody uh, to this Love in Action Zoom call that we're having on revealing God's heart for San Francisco. So it's really great to see different ones coming in from different places. I see different ones. Linda Berquist, always great to have you with us. One of the uh, people that really understands the Bay Area so well and has done so much and uh, uh, helping churches to get started here. And Andy Elliott coming in from Chico. Great to see different ones that are on the call. I'd like to mention each one of you and recognize Dr. Gary Jin. I'd love to do that, but just great to have you all on the call today. And I'm really excited about this Zoom call that we're having together on revealing God's heart for San Francisco. So I'm going to be introducing the panelists to us in just a few minutes. But before that, I do that. I just want to mention that this Zoom call is our first event that we are hosting uh, in our fourth quarter to kick off our year end fundraising. Now, there's no obligation to give on the Zoom call whatsoever, but it is part of our efforts in our fundraising in our fourth quarter. As you know, the fourth quarter for probably almost all nonprofits is the most crucial quarter of the year, and it's where all the big pushes go on. And of course, we're in an election year also right now, so there's all sorts of things flooding into our email boxes and into our mailboxes and everything else. But this is our first kickoff that we're having, and I thought that we would do a Zoom call, not just talking about what YWAM is doing in the city, but putting a spotlight too on other locations and other neighborhoods of what's going on, because I'm excited that there is something really positive and beautiful and compassionate going on in the city of San Francisco. I've lived here now for 17 years, and I just continue to be amazed at all the good things that happen. So we're kicking it off with this Zoom call to start our year-end fundraising. We have a $150,000 gap that we're trying to make up between now and December 31st to meet our budget. So if you want to give, you'll see a link in the chat that will be there, and you can click on that link and give, or you can find out ways that you can give through whether it's a check or you want to do it online or in other ways. It will all be up there. So that's my little pitch for this Love in Action Zoom call. And let me just also say to you that this is our first event. There's a second event coming. November 16th is on a Saturday. And some of the same people that are on the call right now, that are our panelists, will be with us. We're going to be doing a prayer walk from Pier 39 to the Tenderloin, going through North Beach, and then down into City Lights Bookstore and over through Chinatown and over to the Salesforce Tower and through Mid Market. And some of the same people that are here, plus more, will be stopping along the way to get their input. Marcus is going to be talking to us about the North Beach neighborhood, and Mark Scanret's going to be with us talking about the beatnik and the San Francisco Revolution that took place down in the City Lights Cafe Trieste area of the city. And then Steve Hong, who is also with us today, will be talking about the Chinatown, and then Mike Edwards on the East Cut, and then we'll be going into the mid-market, understanding the adult entertainment industry. Gabby will be with us talking about what they're doing, and we'll end it with dinner at YWAM, where Kent will host us and talk to us about what's happening in the Tenderloin. So watch for that. It's coming up. We'll get it out soon. The link for that is November 16th from 1:30 in the afternoon till 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, with dinner, a great prayer walk through the city where we'll be stopping and learning and along the way. It'll be very, very exciting to what we do. So today is our time to talk about God's heart. How is God revealing his heart in the city of San Francisco? And with me today are 4 panelists, and they're going to be answering some questions. Let me introduce them quickly to you. So with us is Mark and Lisa Scanrett. And Mark will be answering some questions and Lisa other questions. Mark and Lisa have been living in the mission. I don't know exactly how many years, so you can correct me.
27 years.
27 years in the mission, in an old Victorian house where they have raised 3 children, and they have loved on the mission and engaged the mission. Mark and Lisa have been involved in police reform, fostering ecological sustainability, neighborhood safety. He leads his own nonprofit called Reimagine. And if you could get the link up for that in the chat, then you can see what they're doing. And that would be great. Mark was one of the first people I met when I came to San Francisco to get me acquainted with the rivers of the city, the deep psychological rivers of the city. Also on the call is Marcus Heusler, who's in North Beach. And Marcus has been there for now over 13 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marcus, but over 13 years in North Beach, or working in the neighborhood. But he has been in YWAM here in San Francisco since the early 2000s, 2002 or 4. He's been part of our ministry here. And then he moved to North Beach, where they're really developing a deep relational community in North Beach outside the 4 walls of the church. And also with me is Mike Edwards. He's the leader of the Reach Global City Team ministry here in San Francisco, and he's residing in the East Cut. And Mike is coming from Berlin, where he has served for many years, understanding a very post-Christian culture in Berlin, and then coming to San Francisco and understanding how to relate the gospel here. And I've had some very interesting conversations with Mike and looking forward to his input. And then our 4th panelist is Kent McCormick. And Kent has been a part of the Tenderloin for the last 13 years in a variety of different ways. Kent he serves in various leadership roles. He's the director of our Youth with the Mission Restoration Initiatives that is focused on the Tenderloin. He's a pastor with We Are Church. He was previously the ministry director of the Crazy Love Recovery Home. And he was also the ministry director for the rescue mission here in the Tenderloin. And Kent is known all throughout the Tenderloin. And what he's known for is his love, his compassion, his relational investment. He does a lot of programs, but you'll find out with Kent, it's not about the programs. It's about the relationships. And Kent has amazing relationships here in the neighborhood. So these are the 4 people, and we're going to just open it up. And I'm going to ask Mark to start us off. I'm going to ask you, Mark, what led you to serve in San Francisco, and specifically the mission, and what makes your neighborhood, your context so unique? And I'm going to add something here, Mark. What's one thing you wish people knew more about your neighborhood?
So first, we fell in love with San Francisco. I grew up in a city. I love cities. And so when our kids were 1, 2, and 3, we thought we want to move to San Francisco and be a part of helping create a Jesus following community in an urban context. We didn't pick the mission picked us. Believe it or not, when we moved here, it was the most affordable place you could live in the central city. And so other people arriving at the time that we did were moving to the mission because the rent was affordable. housing costs were low. And so the Mission District is, I would dare to say, the oldest neighborhood in San Francisco. But let's also acknowledge that we're on Ohlone Ramaytush land, where for thousands of years this was a neighborhood where people fished and farmed and cared for their families. And so we recognize that. What's unique about this neighborhood is that the Spanish mission was built here in 1777. It's why we have the name, the mission, for this neighborhood. It's always been a neighborhood that welcomed new people in transition and migration. And so there's waves of that. We had of course, the Europeans came in 1777, and then you had just waves of people from Ireland, Germany, Italy, Central and South America. And so it's always been a landing place, and that's contributed to this being such a rich cultural part of the city, where there's so many different kinds of people. So it's flavored with a cultural identity around Latin America. So many people came from those Central American countries in particular. And so we really celebrate that. We live just off of 24th Street, the Calle 24 district, cultural district there. And so it's a mashup of new and old, tech workers and Latin families and artists and activists and everybody in between.
Yeah, Kent, how would you come about that question?
Yeah, well, let me just start by saying I fell in love with San Francisco when I was 16 years old. I came here on a service trip to the Tenderloin, similar to the ones we are actually running at YWAM now and have been running for many years. And something profound stirred in me when I saw what God was doing in the Tenderloin. And there was and still is an undeniable sense of purpose here. When I graduated high school at 18, I moved to the Tenderloin, thinking I would be here for 6 months, but here I am over 13 years later, and the neighborhood still has my heart in a deeper way than I thought was possible. The Tenderloin is unique in so many ways. You'd be hard pressed to find a place anywhere else like the Tenderloin. And I think one of the reasons it's so unique, and I'll list a few, I'll try to go quickly. It's a melting pot of people from all over the world, every tribe, every nation represented right here. People from so many backgrounds and so many experiences. And that makes it such a unique place to live and do ministry. And I don't mean spread out. I mean, I'm talking about just Ellis Street. You'll find people from all over the world represented, and I think that makes it so unique. I think another thing that I find quite charming about the Tenderloin personally is and you don't know this until you've been here for a while, but the neighborhood itself is marked by really a deep honesty. People tell you exactly what they think without pretense. That can be a little hurtful sometimes, but it's also quite refreshing and real. The Tenderloin is real. And also, I think I say this a lot if you spend time with me, there's such a powerful contrast in the Tenderloin. It's true that the Tenderloin can be a dark place, and that darkness can sometimes feel overwhelming. But I really believe that darkness provides a contrast that makes it really clear when Jesus is moving. The presence of God shines brightly in the Tenderloin. It's the first thing I noticed when I came here. And honestly, there is nowhere else in the city, there is nowhere else in the world that I would rather be. I'm sure a lot of you live in really lovely neighborhoods, but Tenderloin's got it beat. That's it.
Yeah, Mike, how would you describe who you are? You're muted, Mike. Mike, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm in a fairly new developing part of San Francisco. It's actually in the downtown area, called the East Cut. And actually what it kind of came to life during the Asian summit that was here when the Premier of China and President Biden were in town. One of the things they're marketing is the idea that a new generation is unlike the past generations that commuted. So the Bay Area's got a reputation for commuting in and out of it. And so the idea is, well, let's put residential spaces in specific areas downtown so that people they don't have to buy cars, they can walk to work, play, all those kind of things. So it's actually more appealing for people coming internationally because they don't have to buy a car. They're used to living in cities with transit and all that bit. So it's developing. Its vision is to be a community where people live, work, and play together. And from a missionary vantage point, watching the culture develop is really intriguing because it's turning out to be very international with young professionals. Some of the tones of Europe that I experienced or the tones of Asia that I experienced are coming into play. And so we're excited to see how the development of community happens in a very dense area in a city that has not had that in this part of the city.
Great. It's all different contrast between these neighborhoods. Marcus, how would you describe North Beach?
Oh, North Beach is just like its very own wonderful thing. Like I love our neighborhood. Like I moved to San Francisco 22 years ago and worked in the Tenderloin for the first 6 years or 7 years I was in San Francisco. And then I felt a call to move to North Beach. And I didn't even know where North Beach is. In my head, it was like North Beach, like sounds like beach, so it must be somewhere at the beach. But no, there's no more beach. It used to be, but they did landfill, and so like it's not as much beach anymore. But North Beach, like the beautiful part about this neighborhood is it kind of stayed the same. Like it has a rich Italian heritage, and a lot of Italians move. But when you look at the buildings and the neighborhood itself, you're going to see a lot of things that you would have seen a long time ago too. Like the restaurants, the little stores. We don't have any chains out here. Like they're fighting very strongly for our community and say like, no, no chains, just like the little stores, like and little places that we have. We have tons of really good coffee shops in the neighborhood. A beautiful Italian cathedral, and of course, like the St. Francis Shrine, the shrine named after the guy who the city was named after, which is really awesome. And when you look at our neighborhood, like at the people that live here, you're gonna find people from all walks of life. You're gonna find artists, you're gonna find people that lived here for forever that are just like old school North Beachers that just lived their whole life here. Then you're gonna find a ton of business people that gather in the coffee shops and connect, which all of them do in some way. And you're gonna just connect with the community in amazing ways here. And what I also love like about our neighborhood, it's like there's so many local events that bring this space of like people being able to have community and to come together. And it's just great. It feels like, I grew up in a little village in Germany, and I feel like North Beach, even it has 25,000 people, adding in Telegraph Hill and Russian Hill, feels a little bit like a little village. When you walk down the street, you're gonna kind of meet always the same people, which makes it very unique for a city neighborhood and very special. And then, of course, it has this background with the beatnik movement and a bunch of other things that came out of here. And it's just, yeah, I just love our neighborhood. It's really special.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Marcus. Four distinct neighborhoods, and I'm sure there are many different ways that you guys are engaging. Ken, can you tell us, lead us off with what are the key challenges, the pressing needs that you're encountering in the Tenderloin, and what strategies have been the most effective in really reaching out to the people here?
Yeah, so let me start by just talking about what really is maybe one of the greatest challenges in the Tenderloin, which is isolation. The neighborhood is full of people living in SROs and living on the streets. It's single resident occupancies, for those of you that don't know, government housing. And while these places are often physically full, they're empty in terms of connection. People will tell you that the biggest problems in the Tenderloin are resource related, homelessness, drug addiction, food scarcity. But the truth is, the greatest needs have nothing to do with physical resources. In fact, you'll hear me say this all the time, you can find 7 free meals in the day, 7 free meals a day in the Tenderloin if you walk fast enough. It's the truth. But this is what I have to say. The Tenderloin's poverty is relational, not material. People lack real community, real connection, and so many are searching for a place to belong. The most pressing need is community, and that is something that the church can provide. It's something that YWAM can help facilitate. And unfortunately, while the church is I think able to meet this need, it's often reluctant to engage deeply with places like the Tenderloin. And really, to address this, we focus fully on being present and committed. We need people who are willing to not just serve, but to love and include people from the Tenderloin, inviting them into genuine relationship. When people come, and I really believe this, when people come with open hearts and are committed to walk alongside their neighbors here, God really moves. And that's really what we're committed to doing in the Tenderloin. Everything we do at YWAM in the Tenderloin is focused on addressing this relational need. And you know, a lot of places in the Tenderloin, you'll hear them say things like housing first, recovery first, but at YWAM we are relationship first, and that has always been and will continue to be our North Star. So all of the strategies that we're working on, all of the programs that we're building, they're built around meeting the relational needs in the Tenderloin and addressing issues related to isolation. Like, how do we build bridges from the streets of the Tenderloin to the front doors of our churches and our homes?
Thank you, Ken. And a neighborhood completely different from the Tenderloin. Mike, how would you approach that question from the East Cut?
Wow, that's a big question, Tim. I think for me, my background was in the pretty Bible literate city in the U.S. and then moved to East Germany, former East Germany, which was the most secular in the year 2000, I guess. I moved in 2003. It was the most secular place on the planet. And so the switch from people that feared God to people that forgot that they'd forgotten God, to be honest, it was just drastic. So in the US, one of the questions is that we have a cultural Christian context. In 1990, 90% of America associated with being Christian. 20 years later, that number drops to 60%. And the next 20 years is likely to go to where Christians, people that associate, that's not necessarily that they associate with being a Christian, will drop into the minority category. That puts it firmly in the post-Christian mindset. And so one of the challenges coming here was to try to figure out what's America's post-Christianity going to look like after experiencing Europe's for over 15 years. So the challenges they're probably similar in many places in the US, but they're more accelerated here. So things like the idea of just sitting down with someone and sharing the plan of salvation, surprisingly enough, that's usually not the starting point where people are. They have some knowledge of that. Even in communist East Germany, people knew the basic context of that. What they've not encountered is someone that's authentically living it. And so part of this idea of community and all that is not so much to pull people away from their normal relationships, but to enter into their relationships. That's probably going to be the theme of all of this, the relational thing. People don't want to conceptually believe. That's kind of going against the grain of where the culture's moving. They need to see the life of Jesus in another person. So the challenge in that is just really it's almost volume, because if you walk down the street and meet 20 people, chances are you going to see a Christian or you're not going to see a Christian? And so it's really living life on mission and trying to encourage people to be able to do that on a day in and out basis.
Thank you. Marcus, how would you add content into this conversation?
I agree with both of them, what they're saying. And in North Beach, it's the same thing. People are longing for community. We have a lot of places where you can connect with community, but if you're not part of that specific community, like the artist or whatever, you're kind of not, it's hard for you to connect. And what we've experienced over the years is a lot of people that really are longing for genuine, true relationships and true community. And that's what we've been doing, like over the years, like just building that and helping people through game nights, brunches, encouragement groups, dinners, barbecues, you name it. We had a ton of stuff to bring people into a place of community, to connect them with each other. And it's been amazing to see like how people are really, yeah, pulled into a place of community, and in that community, deeper questions are asked. In a place of like true relationship, genuine, that's where questions come up and be like, hey, why you Christian? You're so different. Like you live so different, like than what I experienced. And then out of that you can start conversation. And I mentioned earlier, like a lot of the people, like we have a very diverse neighborhood, but we have a lot of middle upper class people in our neighborhood. And if they don't go to a church, they're not fitting in any of the church programs to be able to hear the gospel in a church context, because a lot of them wouldn't set a foot in a church, but they would set a foot in our apartment because they are friends and have brunch with us. They would come for a barbecue, they would come for a game night and those kind of things, and have genuine relationships. So I think the greatest need, agreeing with you too, like also in our neighborhood, is community and a sense of belonging.
Marcus,
Yes.
are you seeing any kind of general trend toward what people think about the church?
It's very different. Like some people are really kind of turned off by the church. Some people, they have no idea about the church at all. Like some are very much like moved by a political sense of like, oh yeah, the church aligns with political things. So it's very different that I hear, but a lot of the people we connect with, um, they never had a real representation of like what Christianity or how to
Good.
kind of follow Jesus and what that means.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm seeing a pretty consistent thing that they don't think of the church as a place to go to get community because they have it at work and they have it in the cafes, they have it in the bars. And so the idea that they need to go find community in that space is really not at the forefront of people's minds. It's probably similar in North Beach.
Yeah. Good
yeah.
insight. Good insight. Mark, you have some
Yeah,
thoughts?
historically, the mission has struggled with gang violence, drug trafficking, and food insecurity. Um, but that's layered with gentrification. I point to a time back in maybe around 2009, 2010, where Mark Zuckerberg bought a bunch of houses in the mission and was hanging out in the dive bar on our corner. And these are areas where there's lots of people living outside and people who are really low income. So the contrast between extreme wealth and extreme poverty all mashed up, I think has been one of the challenges. Um, and so a lot of people have been displaced and no longer live in the historic neighborhood where grandma and grandpa or their parents or where they were raised. And they come back because of St. Peter's Church or the shops on 24th Street or lowrider culture, cultural events and things like that. Um, and and in this tumult, in this rapid shift, we, especially in the mid, the mid aughts, we really struggled with a lot of police brutality and police killings of Black and brown bodies was a real struggle, and it was a surprise that it was happening in San Francisco, which is generally thought of as a progressive city, but we're getting our law enforcement off of military bases in the deep South and Texas, and they didn't understand the place where they were, or that the people they were encountering were neighbors. They just saw them as potential threats. I would say on a more spiritual level, uh, because we're a neighborhood where people have come from other places, there's a lot of hyphenated identities, and we're in close proximity, so it can feel like we're connected because we walk the same streets, we go to the same stores, but it's there's a certain level of familiarity or safety that's a challenge when you have these huge gaps in socioeconomic, culture, and language background. And a lot of our more privileged neighbors, they live, well, I wouldn't say even just privileged neighbors. We live 2 or 3 lives. So you have roots back in Mexico or Central America, and part of your life is there. For the more upwardly mobile among us, um, You know, a lot of our neighbors are spending time in Spain right now for 3 to 6 months or a year at a time, and then coming back and forth. And they travel a lot for work. So we're here, we're on Zoom calls in our apartments, but our life is also on other continents. And so what does it mean to be human? What are meaningful connections with people? I think there's a lot of isolation and alienation and a longing for deeper connections.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Lisa here if you could just chime in on this. And then how have you built trust and meaningful relationships with the people in your neighborhood, Lisa?
Boy, I think that's been such a learning process for us, and we've been at it a really long time. And for the other people on the call, I'm sure that you're experiencing that it just takes a long time of showing up over and over and over, and being faithful to that. Some things that I've learned to be helpful is, first of all, to join what's already being done. There, in any neighborhood, there's already good work happening. It might not be being done by a faith group or whatever, but if we can build and collaborate with the work that's being done, we begin to, when you work with someone, you develop a deeper relationship with them. And so that's one venue for bringing light into places. And I think that that's just been really helpful for us. The other thing that I've learned over the years is to establish relationships with mutual curiosity and kind of do two-way relationships where I'm not the person coming in and bringing the goods. I am a person who wants to see good in this neighborhood, and I am offering what I have, but also receiving from the other people in my neighborhood, whether they be people of faith or not. We're all made in God's image. So I can learn from the people who are already in my neighborhood and work alongside them. And as we do that, we build curiosity about each other. I want to know what they've learned and what their concerns are. And lo and behold, then they want to know what my concerns are as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. Kent, can you, I'm skipping around here a little bit. Kent, can you talk from the context of the Tenderloin?
Yeah, I think so similar to what Lisa just shared. Building trust in a place like the Tenderloin, anywhere, right? But especially in a place like the Tenderloin, it just takes time and consistency. I got a good friend, his name's Billy. He says he works with street kids in Manila, and he says trust equals time over consistency. So a lot of that is just persevering, being consistent, and taking the time to really push through. A lot of people give up right before the miracle happens. So you just got to keep going. And you know, in reflection, most of my long-lasting relationships weren't easily earned. They were hard fought and took years of showing up through disappointments, through setbacks, and believing that God was at work in the waiting. You know, I realized I first came to the Tenderloin when I was 16 years old. I met a lot of people, and those relationships I have people in the Tenderloin that I've now known for half of my life. I'm 31 now, and some of those relationships I'm just starting to see fruit. Just now, 16 years, 15 years later. And I'll say here, ministry isn't just about instant results. It's about faithfully pursuing the people and places God's called you to pursue. Even when it's difficult, over time. And I'll say this, like, God has really blessed me with incredible friendships in the Tenderloin. Some of the best and most meaningful relationships I've ever had are with people I met in the Tenderloin. And the friends I've made are some of the most honest, genuine people I know. And I'll tell you, they've made me a better person and a better follower of Jesus. And I think that's the beauty of the place. Relationships go deep. and hopefully they're transformative for everyone involved. But that takes time, a lot of time.
Beautiful.
Kent,
Beautiful.
Kent,
Mike or Mark,
you and Lisa, hang
yeah,
on.
go ahead.
I was going to say, Kent, you and Lisa are highlighting something that's really got me curious, but for people that have lived here a long time, because someone described the fact that we kind of approach love as we know how to love people, but they describe their process in San Francisco as learning how to love people, that it's an ongoing learning, a very intentional thing. Have you guys found that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So what ways do you learn? What categories are you looking for as you're learning?
I'll say, like, I think one really important heart posture to have when you're coming into any neighborhood is this. Don't come in assuming that you have all the answers. Be willing to listen to your neighbors and really learn the felt needs of your neighborhood before you come in and try to solve everything. I think a lot of people sort of helicopter into the Tenderloin with all the answers, and then they helicopter out just as fast because they didn't stop and listen. And so I think the people that last in the Tenderloin are the people that listen and the people that laugh. You have to love the work and you have to listen well.
That's good. That's good. Anybody else want to throw some more salt in the stew here?
Yeah, Mark, you guys have been here a long time. I'm really curious what that process has looked like.
I think I don't have a good read on it now, but when we moved here, in regard to spirituality, there was a real sense of a wound around Christianity. A lot of people we met had moved here to escape Christian America because they didn't fit in or were frankly really poorly treated by people who identified as Christians. And so when we first moved here, if we let people know that we were Christians or I was a pastor, we'd often get a lot of negative feedback and a lot of we'd hear about people's trauma. And that helped us have a different posture to realize people that the like an intellectual argument or a presentation does not win somebody over if their lived experience of people who identify with Jesus is negative. And so kind of our heartbeat has been we're gonna try and live like Jesus without agenda, without trying to change anybody else, but simply trying to be like he was in the world, because we think that's the best way to live, because it's it's a fulfilling, flourishing way to be in the world, and we don't measure things by the impact that it has on somebody else as much as are we part of the flow of experiencing God's care and presence and responding to God's invitation to love.
That's
Mark,
beautiful.
you said something really significant that San Francisco, because San Francisco, from the gold rush days forward, it's a place where people leave somewhere to try to make a better life, right? And so if you walked around the streets of San Francisco and asked the question, what have you left? You're going to get a lot of people being able to enter, oh yeah, I left this, I left that. And we don't, the assumption is that people just come here for the reason that, hey, this is a great place to live. The reality is most people are kind of trying to reset their course and let their past go.
If I'm honest, I'm here because I had wounds. You know, I was a pastor and I got pretty beat up in my context. And I was looking for a place of refuge. And that might be true for others of us on this call too. So we're part of that story in some ways.
Yeah.
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. If anybody has questions in the audience, if you put it in the chat, that would be great, and we'll try to address that. Marcus, any input did you have? I know that you've always said your goal is not to treat people as projects, but just to treat them as people, and just to get to know them as your neighbors and love them.
And I think that's when I just listened to everyone, like that's very similar to all the things everyone was saying too, like long-term relationships, true relationships, and relationships without an agenda. Like I feel like oftentimes people come in with an agenda of like, oh, now I need to convert them in like the next couple of weeks or whatever, instead of like, hey, let's build a friendship. So with some people it took a long time and like there was no conversation about God. But then with others, after a while, conversations opened up. And what I've seen through that, it builds like real genuine relationships. Like that are real, where people can come and know like, oh, okay, if I'm with Marcus and Jen, like they really hear me and they really care about me. And
Mhm.
it doesn't matter if that person's from like a Mark Zuckerberg in your case, what you mentioned, Mark,
Mhm.
or if it's like somebody that's a step away from being homeless or maybe even homeless. Like we never treat people different. And yeah, we just want to make people like really care about people deeply, like with everything we do and love
Marcus,
being with
do
people.
you have a story of somebody that you can share of how they maybe were closed off to faith, but over time they've come? And then I'd love to hear Lisa also share something along that lines.
Um, I have a story like when we just moved to this hill, we met this person. I'm gonna change names in a little bit of the story, but this person named Diane, and she came up to us and be like, "Oh, you guys should join that board, that neighborhood organization." We were like, "Oh, sure. Why not? This is a great way to connect." So we joined something that already existed. And then they planned this huge block party. But when I say block party, you were thinking of hot dogs and hamburgers and stuff. No, this was a block party where they had like an a guy like that performed magic tricks from like the inauguration of Obama, and then they had a cocktail bar with a signature cocktail with design classes of the Toy Tower, and they had a live band. The restaurants from the neighborhood catered to this event. Like, so this was like something very different, and the crowd was very different too. But when Jen helped plan this event, she said, "Hey, I can get volunteers from our nonprofit, and also from our church." And then one person was really like, she's a little bit intimidating, that lady Diane. Like, she said, like, but they're not handing out Bibles to volunteers, right? Like really like intimidating set, and Chen was already kind of scared of her. And she said, no, they were not going to hand out Bibles. They're just going to serve. And so at the end of the time, after the event went by and everybody helped, she said, wow, we never had any better volunteers. This was amazing. So she got a different picture of Christians. And then over the years, she started opening up, and Jen was actually able to pray for her at some point. She came up for prayer, and there's a new openness. It doesn't mean she became a believer yet, but God really started touching her life, and from a point of like, oh, I'm suspicious with every Christian, to like, oh yeah, like
Mhm.
Christians can be different. I saw it in their lives lived. And
Beautiful,
so
beautiful.
that's like
Thank
something we've seen.
thank you.
Tim, can I grab one of the questions in the chat? I don't know if you're
Yeah.
seeing those, but one really piqued me is, and Steve asked the question, given there's so many apprehensive, burnt, shame, people shamed by the church, what spirituality have you seen in your hood that displays God in the ways Christians often miss? This is a big deal for me because, again, I lived almost 20 years in the post-Christian side of it. And the thing that, if San Francisco represents the direction America's going, which it has historically in many different ways, what's happening in the US is very different than Europe. In Europe, when it moved away from the church, it moved towards secularization, moved toward the secular world. What's happening in the US and San Francisco, it's moving toward a spiritual world. People's spiritual curiosity is still here. Even in the office buildings and the big companies, what they'll do is they promote people's spiritual interest because it's part of being a whole person. Now, you can't proselytize, but the spirituality is really accepted. So one of the things we've got to, as our theology teaches us, is that all these roads lead to God, right? He is the ultimate path. It's kind of what Paul taught. So we kind of want to look at people and say, oh man, they just don't believe right. But in reality, they're seeking for God. They really are. God's seeking them, and to enter into that space and understand that. And I think the part of it that's so amazing that you just, in a simple way, Jesus came to bring the kingdom of God. Now, here's the question: if Jesus never walked the earth, if he never came, our concept of morality, our concept of integrity, our value of humans, our sense of justice, our sense of right and wrong, all that would be shaped differently. And if he just start looking around and realize that, man, the fact that Jesus walked the earth, there's so much stuff that you can own a house because there's justice that says someone can't come in and just take your house from you. All those are a result of Jesus's saying the kingdom of God is at hand. So I think what we've got to be more aware of is the fact that we're actually winning this thing. We are, because the world around us is seeking these very things that we believe Jesus taught. And so grabbing hold of that and showing their spirituality is really a point towards the God that we worship and love. It's real significant.
Mm.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Beautiful.
Mike, that just makes me think. I was thinking about what stories I might share and so on. But one thing that's really helpful for me is to remember that I'm in cooperation with God's work. I am not doing all of God's work. So when I was younger in San Francisco, I heard a number of my friends say they'd kind of hold me at arm's length for a while. And eventually we began having more open conversations. And a few of them told me I had to make sure you weren't going to try to do something to me, that the point of our relationship wasn't to get me to join your church or to get me to believe like you did. And once people sensed that I wasn't trying to, I don't know, pull one over on them, then we began to have really genuine conversations about what I found meaningful and what they found meaningful in life. And I could share really genuinely from what I was learning and what God was teaching me in my life. And I had far more significant spiritual conversations than I ever had when I was trying to be so quick about getting to what do you believe about Jesus. And it's not that I didn't want to share Jesus with people, but I think over time learning to respect God's timing in that and to share genuinely with people. So I have somebody who's a close friend now. And when we first met, her son had just gone through his first confirmation, and a relative had given him a cross. And she was expressing how she didn't like it that he was wearing that cross. And I'll edit what she said because there was some profanity involved. But she said, I don't care about Jesus because Jesus is divisive. And I don't want him wearing that cross. And I had said something about like, well, if I don't wear a cross, but if I did, it would be to remind myself not to say something to anyone else. And I went home and I was like, I'm not sure if I handled that right. And this person called me later and apologized and said, I know Jesus is really important to you, but you haven't tried to force that on me. And we had a lovely conversation, but that person over the years has now joined many of the programs that we've done, learning labs. She's one of my dearest friends. We talk about these things all the time. Without trying to define exactly what her spirituality is, there's an openness to Jesus and to God. And like I said, it's God's work, and I'm happy to cooperate with it as I can.
So you're describing a misunderstanding of evangelism I think I've had most of my life. And I've always, the summit was always someone accepting Christ, right? The summit, that was what we're after. But what we're all finding out, we're all saying it in a different way. The real summit is loving people. And the waypoints along the way are going to bring salvation because that's what God does. But our focus is on loving people. That's what Jesus said. They'll know you follow me by your love for one another.
Yeah.
Well, and Mike, through these things, I'm being evangelized every day. Like
you are.
I'm being changed. My relationship with God is being deepened. God is at work in me too.
Yeah. Someone asked the question about the connection to the church, and this is a real important thing. And usually those questions relate to the process, the starting point, because the reality is, like most of us we all probably really truly believe in the church, but the making that the first step often, especially from people that have social issues, is not necessarily the first step. And so the thing that most people are ready for is I say this really weird, let's just share our non-Christian friends with one another. Because when we do that, they're actually seeing us love one another in a way that is safe, a way that they can respect, a way that they can do. And as they trust us, more than one, more than two, more than three, then the introduction of the church just follows that, because that's your relationships. But jumping in and overwhelming them with 40 people that think differently that's a bit of a stretch for most.
Mike, we found, Jesus went to lots of parties and was involved in throwing a lot of parties. And our best experiences in our neighborhood have been when we're throwing a party or we got invited to a party. It's where friendships get built, interconnections get made, deep conversations happen.
Yeah,
we need to
you're
party
saying
more.
There's really only one strategy Jesus gave us. He said, a new commandment I give you, love one another. If you love one another, they'll know you follow me. And a lot of times our love for one another as Christians, it's hidden behind closed doors. And what you're doing with your parties, like, hey, let's just love one another so the world can see. They'll know we follow Jesus if we do that.
We actually
Kent,
saw that.
tell us about the barbecue that's going on.
Who was that directed to?
Kent.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I was responding in the chat to some of the questions. Yeah, so one of the incredible things that we get to the honor of doing here in the Tenderloin every week is we host a really incredible community barbecue where we will fire up our smoker, open up the space, and just invite people in to share a meal with us. And I'll say it's awesome that we get to serve good food, and we serve really good food. I think it's maybe the best meal you can get in the Tenderloin. But what we found is barbecue is just a great open door. It's a good first step towards deeper relationship, because everybody loves barbecue, and you can smell it from 5 blocks away. And so a lot of times folks will just wander in looking for barbecue, and then they'll find really what is the point, a relationship and community. So we kind of have a few different levels when we're thinking about ministry, right? We want to invite people into simple conversations, and hopefully those simple conversations blossom into serious conversations and eventually spiritual conversations. And I think like the barbecue is a great way that we get to engage people that would otherwise not have any interest in engaging with us or the gospel or our community. And that's just one of many, many things that we're doing where we get to invite people into the family of God, starting with something as simple as a good plate of food.
Yeah, Kent, as I roll this thing up here, because there are so many good questions coming into chat. I'm not sure we're going to be able to cover them all, but you guys are stirring up a lot of things, and people are responding and being curious about what's happening. Kent, tell us a little bit more I know that the mission of YWAM at 357 Ellis is pursuing the shalom of the neighborhood. How are you integrating all that together with all the other things that are going on here?
Yeah, I think at the heart of everything that we do in the Tenderloin is the pursuit of shalom, right? That's God's wholeness, peace, and restoration in every life and in every corner of this neighborhood. Shalom isn't just about calm, it's about fullness. It's about creating spaces where people feel known and loved and fully alive, right here in a place that the world often overlooks, but God holds close. Scripture says God's heart is for the poor and the powerless, the orphan and the widow. And each of our ministries is a piece of sort of this bigger picture of shalom. And I think through outreach, through discipleship, through our space, we try to create spaces of real belonging where people, many for the first time, are seen and valued and reminded of their worth. And our prayer is to invite everyone to experience God's presence right where they are and bringing peace that reaches deeper than circumstances. I think somebody put in the chat, like, when do you bridge that gap, right? It happens over time. And I think we're here to rebuild what's been broken, right? If you've seen our video, we talk a lot about how the mission of God is and has always been to restore things to proper order. And I think we want to push back against isolation and addiction and despair, and show that true community and true family are possible. And everything we do is pushing towards that end. Our prayer is that each person encounters this shalom, and that they find home with God and with each other and within themselves, right here in the Tenderloin and right here at YWAM.
Hey, Kent,
That's
you guys are heroes, because one of the things that goes on here, there's a lot of money that goes into this homelessness and unsheltered and all that stuff. The thing the city cannot do is restore human dignity. And you guys are restoring the dignity of humanity in a way that is priceless. It's
Yeah.
priceless. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we say all the time that there's not a policy solution to a spiritual malady.
No.
And what the Tenderloin really needs is for God to move.
Yep.
These are some good insights. And as I wrap this thing up, guys, I want to remind you that November 16th, we're going to continue this, but we're going to continue it on site with a prayer walk that will start at Pier 39, between Pier 39 and 37. There's a little plaza. We're going to be there at 1:30, and then we're going to start hiking around 2 o'clock up the back steps of the Coit Tower. We're going to go all the way up to the top of the Coit Tower, where we're going to meet with Marcus, who's going to share more with us of what he's doing in North Beach. He lives right by the Coit Tower, next to it, where all the parakeets are flying around. And then he'll share with us, and we'll walk down Grant Street, past Cafe Trieste, the St. Francis of Assisi Shrine, and we'll meet with Mark Scanrett at the City Lights bookstore at Jack Kerouac Alley. And if you don't know where that is, don't worry, we'll take you there. And Mark's going to talk to us about the beatnik movement and the San Francisco Renaissance, and Allen Ginsberg, and a whole host of people that have shaped culture here over the decades. And then we'll head down to Portman Square, where we'll meet with Steve Hong. And Steve is an expert on the whole area of the Chinese population in San Francisco, and the honor and shame, and how the gospel needs to be presented in a different way that's more Asian friendly. And so he'll be sharing with us in the square. And then we'll head through the financial district, weaving our way through Chinatown to meet with Mike Edwards at the Salesforce Tower up on top in the park, and hear more from Mike about the East Cut neighborhood and contextualizing the gospel, and then down into mid-market, and then over to the Tenderloin, where we'll eat together, and Kent will share more with us. This is our first event in the fourth quarter to kick off our year-end fundraising. We need to close a financial gap of $150K by December 31st. The fourth quarter is always our most crucial quarter for any nonprofit. And again, this call is not, you don't have to pay to be on this call, but we're putting out our appeal. And if you want to donate, there's a link in the chat, and you can donate through our website or by check. And join us November 16th. We'll have a link coming soon. If you want to stay in tune with us, subscribe to our newsletter that goes out. There should be a link also there in the chat. And we'll keep you updated as to different events that are coming up. We're going to be doing more events here. There's a Thanksgiving outreach going on. There's a Christmas outreach going on. There's a Giving Tuesday outreach going on. You can find about it in our newsletter if you sign up for it. So thank you, guys. I would love to get into more. And I know that a lot of people have more questions. I don't know that we answered everything, but that's the way it usually is. We stir up more than what we can answer, and then we just keep on going and seeing how the Lord leads. Thank you so
Tim,
much for being with us. Yeah, Mark.
Can I just reiterate, like when I think about neighborhood, and what Kent said, it takes time and consistency to build trust. And at one time we were supported to have the time to be part of our neighborhood. That's no longer the case for us. I have to work a couple of other full-time jobs, and I miss the opportunities that I had. There's a role for people who part-time or full-time can dedicate themselves to community building in these urban neighborhoods, and YWAM is doing that. And so I think supporting YWAM, you're basically freeing up people's time to be a presence in some key neighborhoods in San Francisco.
Thank you,
Well
Mark.
said.
Thank you guys for being with us. The gospel is always the same, but how we preach it keeps on changing according to the context where we are. God bless you, and thank you for joining us on this call.